Hello, everybody. So I want to try to provide a useful commentary on the price actions of three stocks that I've covered recently. So that's Nvidia and Iren, and I want to talk about the rotation that seems to be starting, and I want to talk about the Meta lawsuit fear. So I'll get that in the second. I'll get to that in the second half of the video. So first of all, so yesterday I made a whole video saying that Iren was maybe the next to run, and the main rationale for that video was the unfathomable, I'm going to use that word, nonsensical valuation gap, where if I calculate the valuation difference, I find that Nvidia was 5 times more expensive than Iren. And even though Nvidia is arguably a better company, just due to the fact of their native investments, right, of their VC investments and their ClickHouse investments, and maybe the CEO, you could argue, former founder of Russia's Google, Yandex. Sure, it's arguably a very, very good company. Nvidia is arguably one of the top. And when I selected a neocloud to invest in, I selected Nvidia, like many did. But at this point, how can I explain possibly that Iren is 5 times cheaper, at least in the way that I calculated? And so today we saw a beginning of that rotation, mostly in Nvidia being down. And if you look, a lot of the colocation players, so a lot of the former Bitcoin miner who ended up becoming landlords for some of these compute providers, but don't own the GPUs, they were up quite a bit today. Perhaps some of that is due to Bitcoin recovering a little bit. But of course, Iren was up today. It was up more in the beginning of the day than towards the end of the day. But to me, that's perhaps the start of a rotation, and that's surely interesting. And there's a new piece of news that came out that Nvidia awarded an exemplar cloud status to Iren. And of course, Iren bulls will make it seem like it's extraordinary. And it's good. But what the point I'm trying to make is that now Iren is part of the club. They're part of the club. If you look at all of the people who got the certification, right? Nvidia got, I mean, that's AI telling me that, but Nvidia got a bunch of stuff. CoreWeave got a bunch of stuff. AWS got a bunch of stuff, and Iren got a bunch of stuff. So now Iren is clearly part of that club who gets the awards and who gets the nod from Nvidia. And we know that a lot of the people, when they are trying to expand into AI, when they are trying to go through investments in AI, they go through Nvidia's recommended partners. It's Nvidia's recommendation. They go to whoever Nvidia sends them to. And now Nvidia, if someone's interested, they're going to send them to Iren and to Nvidia and perhaps to CoreWeave and perhaps to AWS. And that's a big deal. I remember back in the day when I used to cover SMCI more closely, SMCI was also a very often recommended partner along with Dell. And so SMCI would sell because it was recommended by Nvidia, it was in the Nvidia catalog, it was all part of the ecosystem. And Nvidia wants its ecosystem to succeed. So that's why Nvidia has a strong incentive for all of them to succeed. The sector as a whole is cooperative. So it's a little bit of competition, and it's a lot of cooperation. It's not purely competitive. It's not purely capital destruction. It's not Nvidia versus Iren. It's Nvidia who wants both Iren, Nvidia, and CoreWeave and AWS to succeed. And by the way, if you look at Iren, Nvidia, or CoreWeave, they all have multi-billion dollars of investments from Nvidia. So if you look at specifically Iren, so they want to be able to exercise their 2.1 billion share of investment that they got here at $70 a share. If they exercise it much higher, that's a $2.1 billion investment that's coming, and they have a $3.5 billion deal. Nvidia also has a very big deal with Nvidia. Nvidia also has a very early investment in CoreWeave. So Nvidia has an incentive in seeing these partners succeed. And so that's why, I'm more and more confident that these stocks trade, unfortunately, a lot on hype, at least in the case of Nvidia. Lately, Nvidia has been going up a lot because because it went down, because it needed to be liquidated in order for a big fund, situational awareness, to be liquidated. And so the market makers took it down, and then it bounced right back, but then maybe it got a little bit ahead of itself, and I guess Iren wasn't part of the squeeze just as much. But to me, the valuation gap is going to close at some point, and maybe the catalyst we need is earnings, and earnings for Iren are next week. So earnings are maybe, is it next week, or is either next week or early the next week? It's like August 27 or something like that. It's coming up soon. The earnings are coming very, 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 very soon for Iren, and maybe that's going to be the catalyst that leads to this stock to actually launch. So to me, Nebius got a little bit ahead of itself. I definitely don't like it at around 270. I don't like it around 270. I liked it in the 180s. That was a different story altogether. So that's point number one. Point number two, I want to talk about Meta. I want to address Meta very quickly here. So what's going on? The stock is down on over 3.5%. It was down as much as 4% at one point today. And why is the stock down? Why do you think the stock is down? It's down because of a headline. You type Meta on Google, all you have is the headline. And those headlines, they use on astronomical consequences, astronomical losses, and they run with these headlines, right? Fortune. They run with that headline as large as $1.4 trillion. And that's the number that everybody's reporting. I saw 1.2 trillion reported too. This is the big number that everybody's reporting. But here's the thing. This number comes from SEC filings. And in SEC filings, they have to be hyper scary to cover themselves from shareholder lawsuits. So they have to put the worst case scenario because it's just standard practice with SEC filings. But so the media is running with this number, which, by the way, is the entire worth of the company. Yeah, like the state of California is now going to own the company Meta entirely. Anyways, to me, this makes very little sense, but it makes for a wonderful headline, and it makes for people to sell the stock. Perhaps a lot of retail sees this and sells the stock. Big fines, at least fines that attract the media like this, they very often get renegotiated. If a fair fine is determined, and that's for a court to decide what the fine is. If a fair fine is determined, those fines usually take years to be paid, right? And because you have an appeals process, and it just started. So this is gonna run into the early 2030s. And lastly, we have historical precedent. I mean, so many of my stocks have had precedents like this. The most recent one that took a big hit on lawsuit news was HIMS, of course. HIMS was getting sued by Novo, was it? And that was a big deal, and the stock dropped 30% because it's a small float type of stock. But if you look at Meta, this is not the first time that Meta has a suit. The last one was a New Mexico suit for something somewhat related, and it ended up being a nothing burger. So if the stock drops, I think this is very much temporary, and I think the media will move on to something else, and then 10 days from now, they'll be talking about something else, and that won't be on the top of mind of people, and the stock will go back up. At least that's what I think could happen. No financial advice ever on this channel. But I want to take a pause, to look at the valuation of Meta, which is now getting ridiculous. If you look on my spreadsheet, so I do a lot of comparative analysis. I like to compare growth stocks. I like to compare them on my number, which is enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth, which is a spin on the PEG ratio. I slightly modified the PEG ratio for something that I like better, and that's mostly because I think a lot of the expenses are actually investments, right? I think a lot of the expenses that come after the gross profit line, many of these expenses are investment. I see marketing as an investment. I see R&D as an investment. I don't see it as a pure loss like Wall Street. This is why I like to use enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth. When I look at Meta, it's trading at 0.34. It is so cheap for a Max 7. It is the cheapest Max 7 by a long shot. You can see expensive Max 7s include Microsoft and Apple, and even Google a little bit expensive despite the recent drop. Cheaper Max 7 include especially Nvidia. I don't understand why Nvidia is so cheap given the elite position they're in. But Amazon is also very cheap. But dirt cheap, like unfathomably cheap in my spreadsheet is Meta, 0.34. And case in point as to why I think it's so cheap, I just went to random tech companies. I have a bunch of random tech companies in the spreadsheet. I just scroll down to like 3 names that are, much smaller, definitely not Magnificent 7. Arguably, in my view, a less good business, an inferior business to Meta's business, all inferior growth, somewhat similar gross margin, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at the valuation of this stock. So we have Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Adobe. If you look at the valuation, 0.5, 0.5, 0.46. Like, this even shows that Nvidia is so cheap. Like I would have a hard time justifying paying 0.46 for Adobe when Meta is at 0.34. How do I justify that, right? Same for Salesforce, same for ServiceNow. These are great companies, but these are not century-defining companies, right? And Meta is likely a century-defining company. Social media is not going away. It's the biggest hobby of so many people. It's 4 times bigger than gaming. Last time I covered Meta, was it AppLovin? I covered AppLovin. I was comparing the size, 4 times bigger than than gaming. If you compare, so it's not going away. Social media is going away. Instagram is definitely not going away. WhatsApp literally disrupted text messages. MMS, SMS. Short message service, they literally disrupted that in most countries. I guess the US still uses it a little bit. I absolutely don't understand how it's trading at 0.34 if not for the headlines. And so as soon as the market moves on, maybe they do another press release on selling compute, and this stock could be back at the plus 600 plus range really quickly. So to me, this is a nothing burger, but it could be a tough week. It could be a tough week, especially as the headlines are going to, pick up some sound bites from that trial and use them to, like, I guess, convince people that Meta is bad or something like that. There's a justice system. If they did something bad, they will pay a fine, but it won't be the headline fine. It won't be the headline fine because that's an SEC filing precaution. That number is an SEC filing precaution. That is what it is. Anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.